You know that thing we all had to write in school, the essay? Ever stop to think about where it actually came from? Well, it wasn't dreamed up by some committee. Nope. It was invented by one guy right in the middle of a brutal civil war. And for a reason that's incredibly personal and, honestly, pretty surprising.
The whole secret is hiding in plain sight, right there in the original name. In 16th century French, the author Michel de Montaigne called his writings essays. Now that doesn't sound very grand, does it? That's because it just means attempts or tests. From the get-go, he's signaling to us that this whole thing is one big experiment.
And that's the real question, isn't it? If this whole thing was just an attempt, an experiment, what was he trying to figure out? What subject was so complicated, so slippery, that he had to invent a whole new way of writing just to try and get his arms around it? And boom, here's the answer, straight from the man himself. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this is one of the most revolutionary sentences in all of literature. He wasn't trying to map the stars or understand God. He was trying to understand himself. This wasn't some act of vanity. It was a radical journey inward. So what's really wild is that when Montaigne first published his essays back in 1580, he wasn't just dropping another book on the market. He was literally inventing a genre, a whole form of writing built around one person's honest attempt to get to know their own mind. Now, to really get why this was such a seismic shift, you have to understand the world he was living in. This was not a time of thoughtful questioning. It was an age of absolute, violent, unshakable certainty. And that certainty was literally tearing his world apart at the seams.
Just take a look at this timeline. The French Wars of Religion, this horrific conflict between Catholics and Protestants, kicked off when Montaigne was in his late 20s. And it didn't end until 6 years after he died. His entire adult life was lived against the backdrop of a bloody civil war, all fueled by dogma.
And this is the heart of the problem he was confronting. All around him, people were so absolutely certain that they were right, and they were slaughtering each other over those certainties. In that kind of world, claiming to have all the answers wasn't a path to wisdom, it was a call to arms.
So what does Montaigne do? His solution was to just turn his back on the whole thing. If the outside world was on fire with deadly certainties, he would turn his gaze inward. He'd study the one and only subject he could ever really truly know, himself. And his stated goal was so simple. It was just to observe and record the workings of his own mind, his moods, his character, with complete and total honesty. The amazing insights into human nature that we get from his work, he saw them as just a byproduct of this intensely personal project. To do this, he had to write in a whole new way. Reading his essays isn't like listening to a lecture. It's like you're sitting down and having a conversation. His thoughts wander, jumping from one idea to the next, just like our own minds do. He wasn't trying to win an argument. He was just exploring. That's the whole point of the essay, the attempt. And his explorations went everywhere. I mean, he tackled some of the biggest, heaviest philosophical questions imaginable. Take this chapter title, "That to Study Philosophy is to Learn to Die." Whoa. Heavy stuff, right? But then, just a few chapters later, you find this, of smells. Seriously, of smells. He writes about everything from the human conscience to the postal service. Nothing was too profound and nothing was too mundane for his curiosity. It was all part of the same big picture. So, what was his actual method? Well, at the very core of Montaigne's entire project was a deep, powerful skepticism. He wasn't a cynic, not at all. He just believed that real wisdom starts when you admit how little you actually know for sure. This quote just nails his perspective perfectly. When he looked inside himself, he didn't find some simple, rational machine. He found a messy bundle of contradictions, of shifting moods and strange impulses. He saw a creature that was, at the same time, both a monster and a miracle. And he embraced that inconsistency as the truth of being human. So here's the key takeaway. He just didn't trust our ability as humans to arrive at some kind of absolute final truth. His logic was pretty simple. We are small, finite beings, but truth is infinite. So how could our little, limited minds ever possibly grasp the whole picture with any real certainty? These are the kinds of questions that just fueled his writing. He questioned everything. He'd argue that we don't even control our own thoughts. They just kind of pop into our heads. And he seriously pushed back on the common idea that humans were somehow fundamentally better than animals. And all of this
The skepticism, the humility, the constant, restless questioning, it all gets boiled down to his personal motto. It wasn't some grand statement. It was a simple question he lived by. Qui sais-je? Or, in English, what do I know? And you know what? That humble little question ended up changing the world. This very personal project of self-exploration had a massive lasting impact on Western culture that we're still feeling today. And what's so cool is that his book was a living thing. You see, over the years, he kept adding new thoughts, new paragraphs right into the text. But, and this is the amazing part, he almost never took the old stuff out, even if he disagreed with it later. The book itself became a physical record of his changing, evolving mind. And you can literally see that idea right here. This is the title page from an early edition. His book wasn't some polished, finished monument. It was a workshop. He was physically layering his thoughts on top of one another over the years, creating a text as complex and contradictory as he was. His influence spread far and wide. In fact, many scholars make a really compelling case that Montaigne directly and profoundly influenced, wait for it, William Shakespeare. Think about it. Both were master explorers of the messy, complicated, contradictory truth of being human. Montaigne just did it through introspection, and Shakespeare did it through drama. Back in his home country, the essays were just colossal. For nearly 200 years, they were arguably the single most important work of French philosophy, paving the way for the great thinkers of the Enlightenment who built on his foundations of skepticism and reason. And that influence, it hasn't faded one bit. Fast forward to the late 20th century. The French president, François Mitterrand, is sitting for his official portrait. Of all the books in the world he could have chosen to be photographed with, which one does he pick? An open copy of Montaigne's essays. It's this incredible symbol of the book's enduring power. Which brings it all back home to us, right here, right now. We live in an age that's also full of loud, angry certainties, right? So maybe Montaigne's greatest legacy, his most important lesson, is just that simple, quiet, humble question. What could we all discover if, instead of shouting what we believe, we took a breath and just asked ourselves, what do I really know?